Hey everyone, it's Paul. I am once again crashing in on the Ian cast with Ian, and Ian has told me that this is all right. So
Yeah,
Ian cast, we're on, and this is a much awaited Ian cast because we're going to do predictions for 2020, and all of Bold Profits has been doing their 2020 predictions. Now I know you've got some pretty good predictions that people want to know about. However, we're going to do also just our overall thing. We're going to do Tesla, we're going to do Bitcoin, we're going to do pot, cannabis, marijuana, whatever the right thing that people want to call it. And then I'm going to do my prediction, which is actually not related to Tesla or Bitcoin or pod, even though we've given our predictions on that. So, Ian, let's just first actually just start out with what's going on in the market
yeah.
overall. And then let's go to Tesla and then Bitcoin, because I know you got some predictions around this. So let's go with that.
So today, which is Thursday, the market's actually just made a new high this morning, which is awesome. Of course, we've got the whole tariff thing, the last round of tariffs coming up December 15th, and now it looks like those are going to get canceled. Trump is talking about having a deal with China. Both sides are agreeing. This has been the case for a while. So we're at new highs. The market's doing very well. It's being led by some specific sectors that we want to talk about and that Paul has some really good predictions about. So like industrial stocks are leading, housing, all making new highs, semiconductor stocks, which is really like at the heart of the production process and the industrial process, which is coming back to America. And as a result, we're seeing this huge rally in these sectors that directly benefit from that. So that's a great sign that we're seeing today. And that we've been seeing actually for a few months now. These stocks have been just rallying for a few months straight.
Right, and that's one reason, one thing that, go back to 2018, Ian, and essentially that entire recession thing is it too strong to call it a hoax?
Yeah,
There was
yeah,
no
I'm not sure.
recession. There was
It
no
was way
recession.
overblown. I'm not sure. I guess the trade war, people got way too scared of what was going to happen, and of course, fear sells. So you see that
This
all
is
over the media anyway.
right, right. The thing is, though, we never got anywhere near negative GDP. We never got. We never even got to less than under 1% in any
Right.
quarter. I don't remember. Maybe we had one quarter at 0.8. Maybe we got one. I don't
Yeah.
remember.
It was one quarter that was under 2%, I think, and that
Okay.
was as bad as it got.
Right. And the crazy thing that's going on right now is that you go to Market Watch, which always has the most dramatic headlines, which is like, if I want to test the emotional state of the way the market's being affected, I look at Market Watch. There are still people arguing for crashes, recessions, crisis, and all of this kind of stuff. It's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all over the place, right? So like Market Watch, Yahoo Finance, there's so much like fear out there all the time. You see these like big companies like Morgan Stanley and stuff coming out with their whatever recession model, and it says there's a 90% chance of a recession and then nothing happens. And completely the opposite actually happened. The market's up like 20-25% this year.
Right. So, to make it clear, we are optimistic
Yes.
and we think the market's going up. And from our perspective, the way we look at the world, new highs are positive. New
Yep.
highs mean more money coming into the market, willing to pay rising prices because they foresee an optimistic, growth-oriented future.
Exactly.
Right. All right, Ian, let's go now and do the regular roundup on Tesla, Bitcoin, and pot. Let's talk about Tesla. And you and I were on Slack earlier, and we're talking about Model Y and
Yep.
suppliers. And I don't know if you saw, but Elon Musk is now talking about releasing Model Y, maybe even in the first quarter of 2020.
Yeah, so like it's kind of different for Tesla to have something released early because all the skeptics, like one of their big arguments is he never releases things on time. So now the Model Y keeps getting pushed up. And so China, for example, I think they said was like 6 months ahead of schedule for the Model Y. And another thing is a lot of the manufacturing, like we were talking about yesterday, has been shifted to Taiwan, which we're looking at some actual investment opportunities there for our $10 million portfolio, which has a lot of foreign stocks. We have some stocks in Taiwan in there already, but Taiwan, as a result of these tariffs, has seen a booming economy recently because a lot of business has come out of China and into Taiwan because it's a lot easier to do business there. You don't have quite the same thing that you would get, you know, with the Chinese Communist government. It's not as sketchy. It's just overall easier. And so they're doing really well right now. We're seeing a lot of stocks in Taiwan right around their all-time high prices.
Right. And the one thing that we found in our checks on Tesla is that uh, we found that the Taiwanese suppliers, and there's a lot of Taiwanese suppliers to Tesla, and we are looking to put this into a report. And Ian mentioned his Service $10 million portfolio, which has foreign stocks in it. And we're looking to put together this secret portfolio of Tesla suppliers that are obviously going to boom.
Right.
Because if you've got, obviously, Model 3 is still scaling up around the world. So
Yep.
obviously, you know, more parts need to be going to that. Model Y is just beginning to start to scale up. And then the Cybertruck is still coming. Now, I can't tell you how many people are so unbelievably excited for the Cybertruck. I mean, it's become a pop sensation.
Yeah. Yeah. It's incredible.
You know, TMZ, which is, you know, a site, you know, that follows pop stars and gossip and stuff like that, now tracks the Cybertruck
Yeah.
and gives people, like, you know, literally like minute to minute like updates on this. So these Taiwanese suppliers could be really like a secret play to make a ton of money, like kind of like, you know, if you could have bought into all the suppliers for the iPhone, and
Right.
it would have the same thing, you know, they have the same effect. So Ian and I were working on that. If you're interested in something like that, Ian's $10 million portfolio is the service to check out. All right. Tesla. So we're super positive. And as you might know, I have called personally for Tesla's price target to be at $4,000, joining ARK Invest, which has also put out that price target. And that seems to me actually very doable because Tesla's business model drives on scale. So the more they produce, the more cash flow they're going to generate, because ultimately the vast majority of their expenses in putting up the battery gigafactory, which is a
Right.
fixed cost. And the actual variable cost of putting up, actually making the car is quite small. There's very different economics than an internal combustion engine maker, an ICE maker, where actually they have fixed costs too. However, they've got, you know what, I think it's like 7,000 parts or something
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that. You know, their drivetrain has 3,000 parts, and Tesla's drivetrain has something like 300 parts. So completely different way. And so the take when the Model 3 was first released, Ian, they stripped it down, and they felt that the Model 3 could generate 30% margins, 30% margins, unheard of. And that's really what drives that forecast, which is of $4,000. And I've said, you know, on my bull profits, Ian, that I felt that 2020, you might see Tesla at, you know, over $1,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it would shock people. However, if you've got that much going on, one thing that people always forget, Ian, is that stock market investors are always looking out, like, you know, 12, 18, 2 years, 3 years out. And most people look at the existing economics and be like, well, it's overvalued, it's this, it's that. That's because they're not looking out far enough.
Right. And there's also the fact that Tesla has 2 more of their gigafactories opening
Right.
over the next couple of years. So that's going to really bump up their production and their sales, because there's demand for Teslas all over the world. It's not just in the US. So obviously it's going to be cheaper if they don't have to import them from the US to places like Europe, where Tesla is really, really starting to take a higher market share of, you know, traditional cars. Obviously, Europe is really into electric cars and hybrids and things like that. So there's a huge market already. I think it's the most popular sedan already in some of the Scandinavian countries. So they're putting a gigafactory in Germany, and they're pretty much done the one in China, and then they've got one here. So it's going to be huge, a huge year for Tesla next year. And then, like you said, the Model Y comes out, an electric SUV. That's going to be huge all over the world. They're already set up to really mass produce those in at least 2 of their factories. So there's so much demand out there that it's taken years to build the factories to actually meet it, but now they finally are, and we're going to see that in sales. So they're going to make way more money than they ever have before.
Right. And the price will discount that well ahead of that actually happening. And that's the disconnect between people that are going to tell you that Tesla, whatever is, you know, is going, you know, is overvalued, is all this other stuff. So,
Right.
okay, let's, I think we've done Tesla and there's kind of like, some predictions in there. But Ian, you want to hang your hat for 2020 on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
That's what I sense. So
Yeah.
let's do Bitcoin.
Yeah, so Bitcoin, as I've said before, 50,000 for 2020 is my prediction. And the reason I think that is just because there's so little supply, and the people that are buying Bitcoin are holding on to it for good. They haven't sold. We said last week, 63% of Bitcoin has been stayed in the same wallet since 2018, which means that people bought low, first of all, which takes guts. Not a lot of people really did that. A lot of people were selling, but a lot of people were also buying, and those are the real buyers. So we saw people come in after the huge 85% drop from 20,000 to 3,000. They bought in because they believe in Bitcoin, they believe in the future of it, and they're staying in it. Even though it's gone from 14,000 to 7,000, it's 50% drop. That's nothing to people who have a long-term view. So they're going to be holding on. You know that they're strong hands, which we always praise in Bold Profits. And so they're not selling anytime soon. Of course, we have the futures market now where millions of dollars are being traded every single day. And the Bitcoin that the people are basically betting on in the futures market are actually being delivered. So that is also thousands and thousands of Bitcoin that's going out at the end of each month. Some of it gets sold back into the market, which is why you can see sudden drops, but some of it is also being held on to as well. So that reduces the supply out there with every single expiration of futures. And of course, next year around, I think it was May 13th, last time I looked, we have the halving, which means that supply is going to get cut even more because essentially when you mine Bitcoin, you get a reward for solving these crazy complex math problems. And the reward for Bitcoin that gets paid out to the miners is going to be cut by 50%, which translates to about $60 million in Bitcoin lost every single day that they're getting now that they won't in the future. So when people buy and hold Bitcoin, it's making more of a difference than ever because there's only, I think, 3 million Bitcoin left to go out of the full 21 that will ever exist. And so all these supply crunches are going to translate to an extreme, a huge rally in price. And that's why I think it's going to hit 50,000 next year.
So that's Ian's prediction for 2020, Bitcoin at 50,000. So big prediction, and I'm on board, totally on board. And if you follow me on Twitter at my handle there is at Mampilly Guru, I put out a bunch of tweets based on information I found in the Wall Street Journal, which is that Bitcoin is really held very closely by these closed hands. I mean, 99% of all Bitcoin in circulation really is 8.5% of all Bitcoin wallets hold 99% of all Bitcoin that's in circulation. In other words, if demand ever came through and pushed through 50,000, it's just no big deal. And most coins, as Ian said, just don't move anywhere. The Wall Street Journal estimated that 2 million coins have been unmoved for 2 years.
Yeah.
And there's probably that really doesn't count as well. Something it's estimated that as somewhere between 4 to 6 million coins are lost.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So this is a very, very scarce in its own way asset. And the demand is going nowhere. And we know that supply is set to be shrunk dramatically. So I'm totally on board with Ian for Bitcoin 50,000. All right. Now, just to cover pot, since that's always the Ian cast thematic set.
Yeah.
We're Tesla, Bitcoin, and pot. What have we seen? It does seem like the bottom has been hit. Right?
It does, yeah. And I want to throw out another prediction that MJ, the ETF that I always recommend, is going to double next year because we're seeing crazy fast growth in the U.S., which is the biggest pot market in the world. It's about triple the size of Canada already, and Canada, as you know, it's fully legal recreationally everywhere. The U.S., on the other hand, only has about, I think, 11 or 12 states that have legalized it fully. And it's still triple the size of Canada and is growing at a crazy fast pace. Illinois is starting January 1st. Michigan just started. And it's been shown that millennials and Gen Z, who are the proponents of legalization, are cutting back tobacco and alcohol use in favor of marijuana use. So it's actually taking some of those industries. That's a $400 billion industry just in the U.S. with tobacco and alcohol. So there's so much room to grow in the United States, and we've picked out some stocks that only sell in the US that are projected to grow way faster than Canada. And I'm recommending 3 of those in our $10 million portfolio newsletter this month too. So some more investments to get excited about. But yeah, I think the U.S. has so much growth ahead of it in the marijuana industry. These stocks are going to take off. It's been crazy panic selling. Of course, there was also buy the rumor, sell the news with Canada legalizing it. But in the U.S., there's this huge shift in perception of marijuana. Everybody now is for it, pretty much. It's been a complete reversal from what it was 20 years ago. And even in politics, you're starting to see that. So we had the bill to legalize it or take it off the Schedule I drug list. The House Judiciary got that through. They voted in favor of that. And the House and Senate, I believe, are going to vote in favor of that as well in 2020. So we're going to see these stocks just take off and really start to head back up as more and more progress is made there.
Yeah, I agree with that. And in fact, on my Twitter account, I actually posted a chart that I got from Cannabit, which is an excellent source of cannabis information, just looking at legal cannabis versus illegal cannabis. And in the biggest states where cannabis is currently legal, it's nearly 60% is still supplied through illegal sources. So even just that simple shift from going from illegal to legal demand is a massive opportunity beyond just the growth opportunities that come from really, new markets that can be created from it.
Yeah, so like the legal market this year, I think is around 14 billion, but the total marijuana market, illegal and legal together, is like $76 billion. So it's just a fraction. They're going to take that. Obviously, the black market, like bootleggers, are just going to go away slowly but surely. And they're also taking share of tobacco and alcohol markets. So it's a really huge, way open, wide market for them to really grow into.
Right. So we're both, pretty positive about that. So now I'm going to go into my own prediction, which really is in some ways more dramatic, which is that we have been sort of really building in a way to a moment where I call it the lollapalooza effect, Ian. It's like where so many different things that we talk about in our conversations. However, we talk about it in Bold Profits. We have a lot of these stocks, and you hinted at it that one of the main ways to get at it, because it's such a fundamental building block of it, is semiconductors. A lollapalooza effect of so many new technologies that have been building up, sort of like almost like like a coiled spring, if you will.
Yeah.
And we made a list of this before getting on. So we thought about 3D printing. We think 3D printing is just going to be huge because it's going to replace the old world of lathes and all those old kind of machinery. Instead, you use CAD/CAM software and you print it out. You trial something out, and then you use an even bigger 3D printer to actually print it out in scale. There's a number of companies that benefit from that. Self-driving cars and robotics. I mean, with 5G, you can have an entire fleet of self-driving cars because communication is really critical to that. I know that from my Tesla, where if I use the smart summon, the biggest issue really is the bandwidth between my phone and the car.
Right. Yeah.
And so 5G solves that. AI and blockchain and big data, also 5G matters to that. Generally better internet and more chips in more places. We also talked about space travel, which is starting to become something that is, I believe I saw an estimate for something like a $60 billion industry in something like 8 years.
Yeah.
8 years. And that feeds into other things that is in the $10 million portfolio, which is new materials like graphene, which are super light, that are semiconductors. They've got multiple properties. These are super materials that can facilitate all kinds of human development that before were science fiction. And in the world of energy, the solar power batteries that are getting smaller and more powerful. And then in medicine, precision medicine, where using the $100 genome or less, in other words, you will be able to go get our genomes sequenced for nothing in no time. That way, when you go get a medicine, it's actually matched for you versus something where somebody's essentially thrown a dart Like,
Right.
maybe it'll work in you, maybe it won't. They don't know, but this one is going to be actually sort of really made for you. But put that all together, it's, for me, I came up with this terminology, and I don't know if you like it. So I call it America 2.0. In other words, it's not going to be like, a small shift. It's going to be a jump. Like
Yeah.
if you go back like to someone like you, and even for me, it's unthinkable to think like of a world when, machines were first being introduced or railways were like a thing. I mean, for us that seems so ordinary today. And when you put all this together, it's going to create a world that I believe is a brand new world, America 2.0, driven by all of these technologies sort of coming together in a kind of fourth industrial revolution.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. So we got technologies, materials affecting every part of our life. And the critical elements to it is always in the end, we have to make these things. And that's the industrial sector.
Yep.
And as Ian mentioned, the place where you're going to see this really come to fruition is in the industrial sector, where you're going to see software and hardware there. It's right now, to get access to it, you have to be like in, just the technology companies. But imagine that entire world coming into everything, and where it comes into your houses, it comes into cars, it comes into every single thing. And so, which is why Ian and I were very, very optimistic on the industrial sector. We think that this is the sector that will really play itself out as becoming the largest sector in our economy, which is what it was if you go back to other periods when America renewed itself and sort of created itself, like in the, in the late 1800s with railways and telegraph and telephone, and then in the sort of like the post Depression era, when you had a number of communication technologies, the beginning of computers, a new world was created, and that is what we are seeing today. So we are incredibly optimistic and bullish on the future. We would tell you, don't believe the bad news media that tells you to panic at every drop in the market, at every single thing. And one of the best ways you can do it is I made this video. So you can go check that on Tuesday, on my Tuesday video, Bull Profits. I recommended the 6 trade, which is semiconductors using the VanEck Semiconductors ETF. Because so much of these changes is related to young people coming in and willing to adopt these new technologies, the best way to play on that is through housing. And Ian's talked a lot about housing in the past. Buy the Home Builders ETF, which has the ticker symbol ITB. And the last one is, of course, industrials. I laid the case out for you where you'll see the application of everything from 3D printing to graphene to blockchain to AI. All of these things will come together, and you want to own exposure to the industrials, and you do that with the industrials ETF XLI. So that's SIX. 6 will give you access to America 2.0, to the fourth industrial revolution. And I am incredibly optimistic really about where markets are going to go. I feel like we are going to see a breakout year where we will see the first sequence of 3% plus GDP quarter after quarter, might even see a real 4%. We will also see rising productivity as a result of all of these things being put into our economy. And I believe we're going to see a boom, just a genuine economic boom that is going to shock and stun people. And of course, it's going to shoot our stocks higher. So that's my prediction set for 2020. And so what do you think?
Sounds great to me. Yeah. Yeah.
So we've got a lot going on in this Ian cast. We've got a series of predictions. So let's just summarize it, Ian. So we got Tesla. I think, are you in me with that? We might see $1,000 next year.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's prediction number one. Tesla over at 1,000. Let's say 1,000.
Yeah.
Bitcoin, Ian's
50,
on for 50,000. MJ, which is the cannabis ETF, at where?
Double, just 100% up.
100% gain. And then for me, a mixture of sort of seeing all this lollapalooza effect of all these technologies, capabilities coming together to boom our economy, that is going to drive rising GDP that is higher than anything we've seen in recent history, rising productivity, and markets that are going to continue to rise. If I were to put a number on it, I would say S&P 500 will be up, let's say 20% next year. All right, that's a bonanza issue of the Ian cast, Ian. So I think we're going to leave it there since we've gone on for a bit, unless you've got anything else you want to tell.
No, I think we covered every possible thing pretty well. Yeah.
All right. So with that, Ian and I are going to sign off. Ian, you want to say goodbye? And I'm going to wave everyone goodbye finally.
All right, everyone. Happy Friday. I hope everybody has a great weekend. And Paul?
Bye, Ian. We'll see you next time.